or the Sunset Coast and all points in between. I'd like to welcome you to the overview of government accounting careers. My name is Chris Lezovich, and welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, and welcome. We are so excited that you are here. This is Deanna Laird. I'm the National Director of Accounting Fly, National Director of University Services for Accounting Fly, and we are really excited about this topic today. Here at Accounting Fly, we like to bring you a variety of topics on helping you make good decisions and have really strong and broad information about accounting career opportunities. And many of you know, in some of our other webinars, we often ask you at the end of the webinar, what is some information that you would like to know about? And so often I have seen responses back for requests about accounting opportunities with the government. So today we'll answer hopefully a lot of your questions and give you a lot of really valuable intelligence so you can know what the options are out there. So excited for you, Chris, to be with us, and I'll let you all know a little bit more about Chris in just a minute or so. But let me first take care of some of the things you need to know about the webinar to make sure that you can utilize this forum as adequately as possible. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So we want to encourage you to ask the questions that you have on your mind. And to do that, there is a question section in the webinar menu panel. If you're at a laptop, it's over on the right-hand side, probably of your screen. If you're on a tablet or a phone, it may be at the bottom of your screen. But look for the webinar menu panel, and you'll see a section that says questions. And you can open that up and type in your question, and I will see them, and I will relay them again at the end of, towards the end of the session, the questions that you have. So just to get you into a little bit of practice of this and make sure you know where this question panel is, why don't you go ahead and type in the school that you attend or the school that you attended for your accounting degree. And that way, you can make sure you know where to go when you want to type in a question. I'd like to encourage you to type in questions whenever they come to mind. So as Chris is speaking about different things throughout the presentation, go ahead and type in that question so that you don't forget about it when we come to the actual Q&A session, all right? We may have so many questions in this session that we will get to as many as we can, but rest assured that we will make sure your question is answered, even if we have to address it after the close of the session and get back with you within the next week or so, okay? So don't be shy. Type in what you want to learn about and want to hear about. One other tidbit, if you have a problem with your audio and you're listening to this via your computer, also in that webinar panel, there is an audio section. And so if you run into problems, go ahead and try clicking on the telephone radio button, and you'll see a phone number and access PIN code, and try dialing in via your phone. And often that helps solve any audio issues that you may run into. Okay? All right, back to the really good stuff now. So to address the questions and what's definitely a high interest area of learning about different opportunities with the government, Chris Lezovich has joined us as he mentioned and introduced himself before. But let me give you a little bit more information about Chris, and you're going to be impressed with both his credentials and the experience that he's bringing to this session. Chris has worked with the IRS for over 25 years. Over 20 years of that time was as an auditor with the IRS, and then he transitioned into recruitment over the last 5 years, and he is now the National Program Manager for the IRS. He has worked over 10 years as an adjunct professor, specializing in taxation, and this was at the University of Michigan at their Flint campus. And he's also an instructor for the Becker CPA review courses. Chris holds a CPA license as well as a Juris Doctor degree. So as you can see, definitely has a lot of information, a lot of great experience that he's going to bring to the table to help you know what kind of opportunities there are. So with that, Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you and sit back and listen and enjoy what you have to say.
Thanks, Deanna. I hope that we present some stuff that will be kind of fresh and hopefully minimize the temptation to multitask during this webinar. So today we're going to talk about an overview of different accounting careers within the government, specifically the federal government. And maybe subsequent webinars will talk specifically about particular jobs and maybe the application process. This is kind of give you a general view. As we go to the first slide, this was something, I'll tell you a little history about my process working for the government as far as how I got the job. And you know, after a couple years, well, what happened was I was in school, and I had a couple classmates that had joined the IRS, and one of my buddies, he kept on saying, you got to just apply, and he bugged me for 4 months. And finally I applied and fortunately got an interview, and very blessed to get a job offer. And so I quit my current position and joined the IRS, and I'm going, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I got 2 or 3 years. I'm going to work here, get my CPA license, and then move on to an accounting firm. That was kind of my choice. But after about 3 years, I started thinking, you know, is this going to be, is this just going to be a temporary job, or is this going to be a career for me? And one of the things that I really enjoyed is some of the things that we're going to highlight in this presentation. So I hope you find it a little bit refreshing and informative too. So as we go to the next slide, as accountants in this profession, generally speaking, we kind of gravitate towards 3 different types of positions that we consider for a job. You know, you know, obviously the public accounting firms, whether it be the Big Four, regional firm, or a local firm, you know, they are very heavily recruiting accountants, obviously, and they do an excellent job. And so that's one area. Also in the, you know, maybe we kind of think about perhaps working for a Fortune 500 company or maybe a family business in the private sector. And finally, one of the options is, another option is the public sector option in the government, whether it be federal, state, or local government. And this is the area where we're going to obviously spend our time today with. When I was talking to a lot of students out there, I was kind of surprised that many folks just didn't even think that's, you know, didn't even consider a government job as an option, and for various reasons. And let me just tell you, one thing that you have to find out, and this is what I hope to present to you, is information to give you so you're knowledgeable for all areas in case you know decide what career path you want to take here. You know, one of my students, she was the president of Beta Alpha Psi Sharp, one of the sharpest students I had ever had, and she after class or after the course semester, she came up to me and asked me about career choices, and I told her, I said, personally, I think you should go into public accounting, a public accounting firm. She had it. She had the stuff what it takes to become a partner. And with each one of these segments, there are advantages and disadvantages with each one of these choices. And I thought for her, you know, I thought that was probably her best fit. And so I'm not here. I'm here to not necessarily say you should do this, but also just give you the information to make sure that when you do have these choices, that you know maybe what's best for you in your situation. Again, every one of these have advantages and disadvantages. So let's first of all, let's go to a poll that we're going to take here and just kind of get a feel for, you know, what is important to you. And we're going besides just getting a job. What's important to you in an employer? You know, what is it that really would appeal to you that, hey, I want to work for that employer? And it doesn't matter whether it be an accounting firm, a private company, or a government position. So we'll take a moment, and Deanna's kind of going to monitor that for a little bit.
Okay, so I see all the votes coming in. Let's give it just a little bit of time here. Okay, everybody's looking good. I'm going to close it on just a couple of seconds. So click on a button. Okay. All right, so see that 21% think that really highly value advancement potential, 8% benefits, 13% culture of workplace. Half of the group are really have a top priority on meaningful work and gaining experience, and 9% is pay.
Great. Thanks for participating there. When I was coming out of college, the big topic among my peers, my other fellow students, was pay. It was all about pay. Who's paying the most? Which firm is paying the most? And you know, the other things about advancement, or even you know, whether or not you're going to be doing you know, gaining the applicable experience to challenge you, that was always kind of a, you know, in the background, was always pay. But I've seen a shift, a major shift away from that, and they're looking at more what's more important is other areas. And I think when I was the big selling factor for me was exactly what the meaningful work and gaining the experience to challenge me. What I found fascinating with as an auditor with the IRS is that almost immediately, you know, after the in-house training and stuff like that, almost immediately I was getting my own workload. I was getting responsibility. I wasn't like a gopher or anything like that, just or doing spreadsheets or balance sheet statements or things like that. I was actually making decisions that was impacting people's lives. And so I was put into that situation, and that really appealed to me. And that was probably one of the major factors that allowed me to, you know, motivated me to continue to making this a career versus a stepping stone. Well, thanks for participating here. So let's go into a little bit about federal agencies as we look on the next slide. In general, in federal agencies, their big philosophy is having a balance between your work, family, and personal life. You know, whether it be having the opportunities for your employees to have our weekends free so we can hang out with our friends, or maybe get more involved with our kids' activities. We have that flexibility, and so it's really important. And these are some of the things that they really emphasize, is this work-life balance. And some of the programs that federal agencies offer is, they offer counseling services, whether it be for yourself or even for immediate family members. And they offer advice for legal advice or financial advice, or issues about family issues or child care. They offer some child care centers. But one of the more important things that they do offer is, some of the local offices have health units. Matter of fact, that's kind of where I get my vaccinations, my flu shots and stuff like that. But one of the biggest areas, and you see a lot more employers offering this, is what we call telework in the government, a flexi place, the ability to work at home or other approved locations. And so that's really appealing to me, and we could kind of get into that a little bit important. So what's really important is that, if you make the employees happy, the investment in the training will tend to pay off, and maybe they'll continue employment with them. And this is kind of the philosophy also, with firms such as Google and stuff, because they really kind of cater to the other non-work issues or items for their employers that they benefit right here. One of the things is, with a 40-hour work week, you have your evenings free, you have your weekends free. I know with me personally, that allowed me the opportunity to do other things that I was interested in, such as, perhaps teaching, or going on vacations, or getting away from the workplace, or hanging out with friends here. So let's, so in this, in the next slide, we talk about this presentation. We're going to cover things such as benefits, some type of benefits that federal employees are receiving, how the pay structure works, kind of different. Congress sets the pay scale, and so it's kind of uniform, and so we don't have discrepancies between one Big Four firm and another Big Four firm for doing the same work. We're going to talk a little bit about the type of positions that are out there, a little bit about the application process. Of course, we're going to, as Deanna said, we're going to finish up with some questions and answers at the end. So let's get started here. I'm going to focus in on let's just talk about benefits first. And with this poll, and I appreciate your participation in, we have a couple things I would like you to rate there. What's important to you? Employee perks. You know, some people, for like say the holidays, they like to work at a retail store to get the discount. So that's what like employee perks that we're talking about. Flexible work locations, the ability to work at home or other locations. Sometimes what I'm seeing, some of even health insurance, the coverage for your family and yourself, that seems to be one of the things that some people are interested in, and paid time off. And finally, and this is kind of, I've seen a lot in some of the millennials, is that they're even actually thinking about retirement. Although it's so far away, they are thinking ahead. So I put those 5 items, and so let's take a poll and see what's important to you.
Okay, great.
I'm sure they're all important. So.
You're right. Yeah, they're all important. It is kind of hard sometimes to pick the most important one and focus in on one. But yeah, we have a lot of votes coming in. I'm going to close the poll in about 3 seconds. So if you haven't voted, vote now. Okay. Right, great. Oh, Chris, we have 2% where the employer's perks were most important, 29% with flexible working location, 23% with health care coverage, 17% with the paid leave, and then 29% focusing on the retirement plan. Great.
It doesn't surprise me in the employee perks I talk about the discount. It seems at school we always had that, the 2% discount if paid within 30 days. So I appreciate you following that course consistent with your studies there for employee perks. Well, thank you very much. Let's dive into a couple of these right now. What I think one of the things that you may not be aware of is we're going to talk about leave first. And this is sort of unique. We're seeing that some of the larger companies gravitate toward this system, but not a lot right now, especially with the economic downturns here in the last 4 or 5 years. In your annual leave, leave that you can take for without any reason or anything like that, is in your first year, the first 3 years, you get about 2.5 earned leave, annual leave that you can take, paid holidays or paid leave, 2.5 weeks. And that is not, you don't have to wait until the end of your first year. You accumulate per pay period. So after your first pay period, you've earned some leave right there. And once you've been employed, and this is where I was contemplating after about 3 years, like, oh, wow, now I'm getting 4 weeks of vacation paid. That was pretty good. Fortunately, now I'm over 5.5 or about 5+ weeks of vacation every year. It's kind of tough. So they do allow a program where you don't have to use all of it. If you don't use it, they allow up to 30 days that you can carry over into the next year. And so I had a buddy of mine, another recruiter. He would always take 4 weeks off in a row in August. Fortunately, he had the opportunity to do that. So annual leave is one of the things that does appeal to a lot of people, especially having that, taking the 2 or 3 week vacations if they choose to do so. Yeah. In the next slide, we talk about the sick leave. So in addition to the 13 days of a year in your first year of annual leave, you're also entitled to sick days, paid sick days, for, again, 2.5 weeks every year. And again, those can also roll over. Any amount can be rolled over in the future years. Every year, there are 10 paid holidays. And just like 4th of July coming up, don't have to punch in the clock, but still getting paid right there. Now, some agencies allow that if you don't use all of it upon retirement, some of that will go towards your retirement benefits, meaning if you have a large amount of annual leave, maybe you can retire early with full benefits instead of waiting the time frame out there. So leave is kind of a lot of people talk about that there. So on a couple other benefits that they have a large choice of a variety of different healthcare coverages. I don't know if you knew that. Sometimes you always think, well, if you're a member of Congress, a government employee, they don't have to pay for their healthcare. No, that's not true. Pretty much all employees have to pay a portion of it. The government generally subsidizes approximately about 2/3 of that, and you pay 1/3 of that for full coverage. That's kind of a good deal, whether it be an individual or family member. One of the other areas that you emphasized as far as what's important to you is retirement plan. The federal government retirement plan is housed in a fund called the Thrift Savings Plan. Sorry about that. These are your 401ks, your pensions, and stuff like that. Now, one of the things about this benefit is that as you contribute, the federal government will also match that contribution at least up to 5%. And even if you don't participate, even if you choose not to have any amount held from your salary, the government will actually still provide 0.5% of what your pay is into a 401k for you. And as long as you're fully vested, you'll be entitled to that upon when you depart or when you retire. So that can add up fairly quickly. And a couple other, in the next slide, we talk about some other fringe benefits. Some of the offices have fitness centers. I know our building has a place where you can work out, whether it be before, at lunchtime, or after work. Again, the flexible work schedules is a big perk. It's a lot of federal agencies are doing that, and that's going to be dependent upon the position itself and with management approval. And sometimes you have to work within the contracts, the union contracts, when it's available. A few of the federal locations have health units, whether it be getting a Band-Aid or aspirin, or actually getting your tetanus shot or something like that. Again, that's all free, available on location. Of course, they do have some other items, and one of the other items is that the Congress had passed a authorizing federal agencies at their discretion that they can participate in what they call the Student Loan Repayment Program. And what that is that, and not all, a majority of the federal agencies do not participate in that, but some agencies do. And I just want to share that with you. And basically what it is that the government will forgive a certain dollar amount, let's say $5,000 worth of your student loan, as long as you commit for another, maybe 3 years of employment right there. One of the things they do, they invest heavily in the training in the first couple years of employment, and to help recoup that investment, they'd like to keep their employees on a little bit longer. So this is one of the incentives that's approved by Congress that allows students with student loans maybe an incentive to stay a little bit longer right there. And of course, some locations offer subsidies, whether it be for child care or, like in Chicago, they could offer things such as discounts or for the L or for the various transits for public transportation, stuff like that. So that helps in certain circumstances right there. And just to make sure that you're not asking this, as an employee of the IRS, I still have to pay all my taxes. I don't. Some people say, well, you work for the IRS, you don't have to pay any taxes. That is not true. So don't go into thinking that that's a particular federal benefit. Let's go into in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the pay scale. And I appreciate your time in kind of understanding this, because what happens is, if you ever apply for the position, they're going to start throwing, what the salary range is, and you're like, oh, how does that all work? So I'm going to kind of do a quick overview of this, so you just have a little bit of knowledge. the general scale, the general schedule, called the GS schedule, is the predominant pay scale within the United States Civil Service, within the federal government. This GS includes the majority of white-collar personnel, including like professional or technical or administrative or clerical positions. So this is the primary one. Probably over 70% of government employees fall under this pay scale. This is the primary one. The other ones maybe, maybe some blue-collar workers, like people who work on loading docks, or folks that are in the executive level. They fall under a different pay scale right there. The pay scale itself, and this is what I really want to explain this to you, is called a grade step. It has no correlation to the GS in the general schedule, but the grade step is how they present that information, how they present the scales, the pay scale right there. So the let me see here. The general schedule is separated into 15 separate grades, and each grade is separated into 10 steps. Well, let me kind of explain this a bit. Think of it as an office building, and it's got multiple floors, and every floor is a grade, and within each floor is 10 cubicles, and each cubicle is a step. And so all the different cubicles and all the entire office building represents a different pay amount. And so what happens is that the position that you apply for is predetermined on what floor you can enter into, what floor you can get off in the elevator, whether it be the 5th floor or the 6th or the 7th floor. And so that's pretty much set. You get hired, they're going to say you can only get off on this floor. Now, within each floor, you've got this 10 cubicles, and now so that's the floors are kind of regulated by the federal government itself. Each agency can regulate the different cubicles, and so sometimes a lot of people will start at cubicle 1 as far as their pay goes, but the agencies have a tendency to offer, maybe the 5th cubicle or the 10th cubicle, which is more money on that floor, and sometimes it's to be more competitive to other offers that you may have. There's a lot of different reasons, but that's within the agency discretion. But generally, you start off at the cubicle on whatever floor you get off on there. There is by the way, Wikipedia has a great summary of how this all works and explanation, all that stuff there. So they have a base. Congress sets the base salary every year, and back in I think it was probably like 1994, they began to see a discrepancy between the pay of government workers and the same position, accountants, auditors, in the private sector. So what are the starting salary at the CPA firms versus what the starting salary at the government? And so there was a major discrepancy. And so Congress passed a law to incorporate what they call locality pay, a supplement to your base pay. And that not only is to close the gap between the private sector and the public sector, but also to take in consideration the cost of living in different regions of the area. If you're in Butte, Montana, you're probably going to have a lower cost of living than in San Francisco, California. So that locality pay takes in consideration of that. And of course, there's a separate pay scale all for the executive and higher up upper management right there, which doesn't include the local pay. So we're going to go through a couple examples right here to show you how that works. So if you ever get fortunate to get employed with the federal government, the grade structure, again 1 through 15. Generally speaking, the first 7 grades is going to be your entry-level position. So you're going to start off on one of the first 7 floors. There are some exceptions where you could start off perhaps on the 9th floor, but generally up to grade 7 is going to be your entry-level positions. The next section of grades is considered your mid-level. And then, of course, the top level, the more of the ones with expertise, as far as managerial positions or technical positions are going to be your top level positions. Again, with each grade level, there's going to be a higher range of salary that you're allowed there. So let's so that's the grade part. Again, now we're going to talk about the cubicles. And so within each floor, you got those 10 cubicles. And then if you don't move, if you stay on the floor after a year, you're going to go to the next cubicle. So the first 3 years, you're always going to be moving to the cubicle. You start off at 1, you're going to go to 2, then you go to 3, then you go to 4. So every cubicle is going to be a different, higher pay increase. After a couple years, or after you got to step 4, then there's a various increments. So over a period of time, you're eventually going to end, if you stay on the same floor, you're going to end in the 10th cubicle right there. In the next slide, what happens is the entry-level position, what floor you get off of, really depends upon your combination of your educational and your work experience. That combination of what you qualify, what position you qualify, what floor do you get off you can qualify for. But if you look strictly as an entry-level position, perhaps right out of college, if you just look at the educational portion itself, this is what you're looking at. You're looking at a GS 1 or 2 is pretty much, you only got a high school level. If you have at least 2 years of college, you could qualify for the 3 and 4. Most of the people that I work with have bachelor's degrees, so they're going to qualify for that 5th level or that 7th level. And then finally, if you have a master's degree or higher, perhaps a Juris Doctor degree or a PhD, you qualify as an entry level with a little bit a higher floor, so to speak. Let's go to the next page right here. How we doing? Okay, kind of getting this? Okay, let's go. Depending on the agency and the work description for that position, the GS position may provide for advancement within a what they call a career ladder, meaning that employee performing satisfactorily will advance automatically between grades, normally on a year-to-year basis, until they've reached the top GS level for that particular job, and that's what they consider full performance right there. Advancement beyond the career ladder, beyond the journeyman level, to the top grade, like either again specialized technical positions or managerial positions, would be subject to the competitive process. So if you are in the career ladder section, you're going to get automatic promotions, automatic movement up to another floor until you've reached the what they call the full performance level for that position. After that, it becomes competitive. And so if you apply for the next position and you get it, you're going to get your grade increase. If you don't get it, then you're still going to be entitled to the step increase. So let's go through an example. For example, as an auditor, and you start off with a GS, let's say, well, in most professional occupations, entry to the mid-level positions are classified as 2 grade intervals. That is, an employee would advance from, say, a GS 5 to a GS 7 after 1 year, then to a GS 9 after another year, and finally to a GS 11 after the 4th year. They would skip the 6, 8, and 10 levels. Again, that's for the professional occupations, positions that we're talking about today. Let's turn the slide right here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the pay structural as far as dollars amounts goes. And so depending on what floor you get off, again, this is the base pay, not with the locality pay. This is what Congress sets as the base for everybody. And then we have the variable locality pay. So it shows you that that if you just look at the grade 12, each step, each cubicle is over a $2 grand increase each year, for each new step right there. If we go to the next one, we start to incorporate the locality pay. Again, locality pay could be up to 35% in addition to your base pay. So if you look at a GS7, which could be an entry level for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, and you could start off like in Chicago, it could be $43,000, or in San Francisco, it could be almost $47,000. And so that's kind of what we're looking at as far as the starting salary in different localities. Again, you'll see on any job announcement the base salary and the locality as one. So let's get an example in the next slide. If we start off as an auditor, and we get the old elevator card to get off at the 5th floor, we'll start off. Again, this is today's salary. Start off at $35,000. The next year, again, this is a professional occupation, so we have entry level into the mid-level GS grades with 2-step increments. So we go from a 5 to a 7. So the next year we'll get about an $8,000 pay increase. Another $10,000 the second year. The third year, we're looking at another $11,000 at $64,000. And finally, if the journeyman automatically goes to a 12, which some positions do, you're going to double your salary in about 4 years, from $35,000 to about $77,000. Again, this would be every location is going to be set different, but this is the concept that you should worry about. And there's the hourly rate, because some you may want to do that as a comparison to what the actual salary is. Great, thanks. Next slide just shows you the basic range for senior executives. If you get that, I'm sure those numbers will change when you get there. Let's go with the type of federal positions that are available. I broke this down into 3 different categories. One is, perhaps while you're still in school, student opportunities. And then in the federal government, not only do you have student opportunities, we also have what they call office and field positions. Office is that every 5 days a week you're going into the office to perform your duties. Field position is that you could go in the office, or you could perform your work at a client's location. A lot like if you're in a CPA firm and have ABC company and you're going out to their headquarters for a week of auditing. So that's what field means. And now within field, there are auditors, which are your civil enforcement, and then you have the criminal enforcement. These are the accountants that carry the weapons, carry the guns. We have a saying here at the IRS. Well, more of a I wouldn't say a necessary saying, but it took an accountant to get Al Capone. So that's our criminal enforcement. In addition to all that, there's a federal executive order, a federal statute that says in order to have a permanent federal job, you must be a U.S. citizen to apply. If you're not a U.S. citizen, I don't care if you just have a green card, but you're not actually a U.S. citizen, you're not eligible to apply. There are some exceptions. There are some agencies such as the FBI or the Postal Service has exceptions to those. There are some other exceptions listed in on the website where you apply for these jobs. But basically, you need to be a U.S. citizen in order to apply. So let's go into a little bit about the different programs here briefly. We've got student programs. What had happened is that a lot of different federal agencies had different student programs. So you could go to the FBI and they had one program, and then the same parameters is totally different if you go to the Security Exchange Commission. And so the government said, hey, let's consolidate this and make it simple. So whether or not you apply for one federal agency or another federal agency, the process is still going to be consistent and the same. So they consolidated all these different types of student programs into basically 2 different areas. The one they call the Pathways program, that's the most common one, and then they have a Student Honors program. And both of these programs was designed to bring in talented students and giving them exposure to what they do, giving them on-the-job training. And the big thing about it is that after their period of their program, so to speak, they have the opportunity to be converted into a full-time position without competing for going through an application process. So upon completion of these programs, they get the offer to full-time employment into that. So it's a great program that we have. There are some agencies though that have their own non-paid interns, so to speak. They're volunteers, and so that's not run by the federal government, or the federal statute. It's pretty much run by the agency itself, and those will be posted as well. But they may be different as far as between one agency to another agency. But those would be non-paid interns right there. So let's go into the next slide where we talk about the student programs, the pathway programs, and basically it's fall under 3 different areas. You can go again, you can Google pathways and find more details about this. But basically we have an internship, and we'll talk about that real briefly, a program called for recent graduates, and then finally a presidential management fellows program. So we're going to spend a slide for each of those disciplines right now. So we go into the pathways program, the next one. This is the next slide. This is the most common internship program or externship. The internship program, it's known in the federal government. They have to have titles for everything and not necessarily make sense, but it's called the student trainee. That's what an intern is, a student trainee. So if you ever hear that pop up in an announcement, that's what it means, an internship. Generally speaking, there's some criteria for that. Again, most of the folks are be eligible for this program when they have at least 1 year of school left, so they can work through the summer full-time at the agency, and then part-time while they're going to school, and then upon completion, upon graduation, they'll be converted into a full-time employee. This has the opportunity to work alongside other agents, get a feel for actually what you're going to be doing, and kind of get your hands dirty on that stuff. So there's that program available. Another program, you don't see a lot of this, is called the recent graduate program, and sometimes, so they want to offer a program for people that are going to be, maybe just graduated or they're no longer a student, and so they have this graduate program, sort of the same thing as the internship program, the student trainee program, but there's a little bit more different parameters. They have, considering that they're pretty much working there full time, their training period, sort of their period of development is a 1 year program, and after that they get converted into a full-time employee. And technically, it can be within 2 years of a degree, either before or after that. So that's another program that's available. And finally, the last program is what they call the Presidential Management Fellows Program. It's usually a shorter period of time, a 10-week program. It's really more technical. It's very competitive. A lot of the positions I've seen for this particular position, it occurs in Washington, D.C. You actually, got to be kind of a top student, but it's restricted to certain disciplines, certain majors, including law students, and they're getting right into the heavy stuff. They're not shadowing. They're getting their hands dirty really quick. So that's a very popular program and very competitive too. And finally, so we talked a little bit about student programs. We're going to talk now a little bit about the office positions. Again, these are positions that would be available if you want to just go to an office daily. They could be ranging from examiners to specialists to accountants, auditors, a wide range of different types of positions. If we look at the next slide, some of our field positions, this is where it tends to be people with actual accounting degrees or finance degrees or somewhere in that area. They have auditors, and the Internal Revenue Agent is an auditor of a specific title within the IRS. This is the position I was at for over 20 years, or for a few weeks. They have Security Exchange Commission examiners. So the IRS is going to examine the tax returns, which is private information, and of course SEC is going to audit the financial statements that's presented to the government and for the creditors and for the public. And of course, they also have examiners for banks, credit unions, and a wide range of different types of agencies that employ type of auditors or accountants, and whether it be for reviewing defense contracts or things like that, a wide range of different type of positions available for accountants. And finally, not finally, but let's talk a little bit about the next slide when we talk about the field positions. Again, these are the folks who are in law enforcement, so they're going through training as if you were a state police officer, whether you could be training alongside them, or whether it be in the FBI or the IRS. Or what happens is almost every federal agency, nearly every federal agency has criminal enforcement section. There's their CI section. Within the IRS, there's a specific title they call the criminal investigation agent, because they're going to deal specifically with tax fraud. But whether it be the FBI or the Security Exchange or the Border Patrol or Drug Enforcement Agency, they all have different types of law enforcement. So these are the folks that you see on TV with their letters on their jacket when they're in the news there, displaying what agency there is. A little bit, the next slide talks a little bit about, there are some federal criteria in order to qualify for this position. Again, you must be a U.S. citizen. There's an age requirement. Basically, the federal law says you have to be at least 37 when you start. Some agencies have it as low as 34. Again, it can't be over that amount. And there are a couple do's and don'ts that you can't, in order to qualify. You got to file your tax returns. You can't be a felon or convicted of a felony, and a few other things right there. So something to keep in mind. This appeals to a lot of that. Now, some people are into, like, say, forensic accounting. That application or that process can be applicable both in the civil and the criminal enforcement positions. Next slide. What I want to talk about is, this is one of the biggest questions. Hey, so Chris, if I start off in with the IRS or with the Security Exchange Commission, I'm an accountant. I want to get my CPA license. Can I get my experience? Will it qualify? I know with the and it really depends upon every federal agency is going to have different criteria for that, what qualifies for their experience. I know with the IRS is that we actually have CPAs that will certify your experience from day one that you're hired, including the training portion of that. And you get your 1 or 2 years of experience, and then they'll write off as far as doing the paperwork to submit the paperwork to get your certified public accounting license right there. So that is available. That is available, and so kind of keep that as an option right there. Finally, let's talk really briefly about the application process. All federal jobs pretty much are, whether it be the Pathways program or the career jobs that we talked about, are going to be on a website called usajobs.gov. The honors program, whether it be a law for a law position or within each agency, maybe some type of accounting position, the student honors program is handled within the agency itself. So sometimes you have to go to their website to see if they've got opportunities for within the honors program for a particular job right there. And in addition to that, my last slide I want to talk about is, and thanks, Deanna, I'll be done here in a moment here, is what about in the future? Well, what kind of opportunities do we have right there? Because of a lot of the appropriations restrictions that Congress has provided for most federal agencies, there's been what we call a hiring freeze. There's been a substantial reduction in the amount of opportunities, at least externally, for college graduates especially. And we're seeing that slowly being lifted. And so as the fiscal year ends in September and the new fiscal year begins October 1st, we're going to probably see more and more opportunities. We see this kind of thawing out, and so perhaps my next presentation we'll talk about specific jobs that are available and how the application process works. So I appreciate you taking the time today and learning a little bit about opportunities for accountants, at least in the public sector. in federal government, and there might be other opportunities. You know, you might not ever consider this, and maybe that might open the doors for something that and ask more questions right there. I appreciate you taking the time today, and I think Deanne's going to ask, maybe we have some questions and answers right now.
We do. We do have some questions, but first off, thank you, Chris. That's a lot of really great, detailed information. So I'm sure it's going to help out a lot of people here. And I'm going to start giving the questions to Chris. I just want to remind you now, go ahead and type in any questions that you have in the question panel, and we'll collect them as we move along here. Okay. So let's start off with on age limits. She mentioned about an age limit for some of the positions, but another question about just in general, federal government accountant, are there other age limits that apply that may, be a criteria or a limitation?
Not really. There are only when it comes in in criminal enforcement, and that's a federal statute. Sometimes the Army, even the military, has the same type of thing, restrictions. But when it comes to civil, no. And actually, how the application process worked, that's not even considered. We had a gentleman out in the East Coast who came in for an interview, and this gentleman was like 72 years old. No idea that how old he was, and so that's not even a factor. It's not even a criteria that they even look at in consideration whether or not you get an interview. So no other restriction. Now, well, technically there is a restriction, a minimum restriction. There is that you have to be at least 16 years old, but no maximum other than the special agent position.
Okay, great. And you mentioned that the experience of counting for getting your CPA certification. Can you expand a little bit on the benefit of having the CPA certification when you're working for the government? How can it can help you?
Great question. That's a great question, and every agency is different. I'll give you my personal experience. In the direct benefit, there wasn't any. There wasn't any. They help support, help supplement paying for my review course. But when I got my license, it didn't increase I didn't get an automatic promotion. But what it did do is that when it came to the competitive level, the GS-12 was it above, or in the top tier right there, is that was a feather in my cap. That was the whether or not that helped, I think it did. When it came to promotion potential, so I'm competing with all my other coworkers for the same position for the next level up, and they have the same experience that I had within the government. So that showed a little initiative, and that showed, and I think in some of the promotions that definitely helped me. But there's no necessarily it's not an automatic salary increase because you got a particular type of degree. You may be eligible. Now, what I found is as a CPA is that when I did my audits, I had a level of respectability when I dealt with the clients and their representatives. So, good question. So that's one of the things that you might not find in the private sector. You might not find in public accounting.
Right.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, good. Can you explain the difference between internal revenue agents versus auditors versus SEC examiners?
Sure. So the internal revenue agent is a specialized term. So it's only for the IRS. That you won't find that position in any other federal agency. We have we're one of the few agencies that have special titles like that. Because our scope is really in the tax examination area. And so a revenue agent is an auditor of tax returns or money laundering or something that deals with even foreign transactions, credit card fraud, things that were different types of tax shelters that involve potentially avoiding the compliance area of the tax laws. And so they're examining tax return information. Again, privileged information. They can't necessarily, we can't disclose that even to coworkers, people in the same group, because it is privileged information. So there is some sensitivity to that. But they're basically auditing whether or not the tax return itself is substantially correct. An auditor, on the other hand, is usually reviewing whether it be they could be reviewing defense contracts. A lot of that is going to be public information of some sort. They're going to be, whether it be, so a lot of governments involved with different third-party contracts with vendors and stuff like that. So they're going to be reviewing those defense contracts. They're going to be reviewing, how the money was spent and allocated. So they're also going to be doing things such as payroll distributions. And so they're kind of a general. If you look at a business, they're going to be mostly the accountant, the auditors of how a general business would do other than tax returns. And that's a Securities and Exchange Commission examiner. Where they're focusing in on is that they are companies that go public and have public information for investors or financial lenders and stuff like that. They provide financial information for the public in various statements, such as the quarterly statements, the annual statements, like that. They're auditing those statements to make sure that they are substantially correct. If you recall the Enron situation, in Enron, there wasn't necessarily a problem with the tax return because that was private information, you couldn't do that, but it was the public information. That was deceptive. And so they're looking at the compliance and the disclosure of the financial information that's made public by public traded companies.
Great. We have a couple of questions here that I think I'm looking for advice on maybe how to make themselves stand out. Like one, for example, it sounds like someone's applied and seems to meet the qualifications, but just hasn't been able to kind of break through. And another is a person even asked, do I need someone on the inside to kind of help push me? So can you just give some tips on, what can they do to make themselves really stand out and be competitive?
That's some great questions. The application process to get a job in the federal government is substantially different than in the private sector. It has, I even as a recruiter, I cannot see any of the application files, people that applied. I have no idea. So it's pretty, that's privileged information. And so knowing someone, whether it be a third-party company out there who is trying to generate business, hey, I can get you a federal job, or and someone that actually works for a federal agency, has really no influence on the process of getting applied for the job. So if the president's daughter want to apply, they're going to go through the same process as you and I. And there's a lot of reasons for that too. So knowing someone on the inside is not necessarily going to be helpful. What's going to be helpful, though, and this is because we may have a position and we have like one position, and we may get 500 applicants. What's going to distinguish you out there? What I strongly suggest is, and this is based on people that are doing the qualifications, is that when you look at the job itself and look at what are the specific duties of that position, which are listed in the job announcement, and you're going to have to address each one of those individual duties, whether it be through your education, whether it be a project that you did in school, whether it be your work experience or something that you did with your family, or even your aspirations of wanting to do something like that. You should address all those elements, all those duty elements of that position. We've had some positions. We've had some candidates who are excellent. They were just excellent people, and they answered 3 out of the 5 duties. They were just top. They were probably top in the application pool, but they failed to address those other 2, and so as a result, they never even got the opportunity to interview. So look at the job description, the job duties, and try to address as much as you can with specific examples relating to each one of those duties.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask one more question, but before I do, we're at the end of the allotted time for this. So I want everyone to know that we do have a lot of questions that we just haven't been able to get to. I mean, thank you so much for submitting your questions, and we had really great turnout for this webinar. What Chris and I will do is we will get together in the next few days, and we'll address each of these questions, and then I'll send out the file or the information to you, okay? So rest assured that your questions will be answered. Also, right now, before you leave, jot down my email address. You should see it on the screen, and feel free to email me any questions that pop up in the next day or two that come to mind. So feel free to do that, and we'll just add them to the list of questions that we have. Okay. So one more question, just due to lack of time, but this has been great. And I guess let's see, the question that I'm gonna pick it randomly out here with all the ones that we have remaining. Which agencies participate in the student loan repayment plan? I think that was a plan that sounded really interesting, Chris. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Certainly. The IRS does not. I know they've talked about that several times. They've not implemented that. When I got into you got to go into the specific website for that particular agency to see if that's one of the benefits that they participate in. Security Exchange Commission, I think that I recall, I apologize for going from memory though, but I believe that they participated in that, and I think the FBI did. If not both of them, at least one of them did. When they first came out in the first year, I think we only had like 4 agencies that participated in that. But I believe the Security and Exchange Commission is one of them. Yes. And whether or not any of all the federal agencies have the opportunity to do that, and whether or not they're going to choose to include that as one of their benefits is to be determined. But the IRS does not. But I believe the Security and Exchange Commission does do that. Yes.
Great. You know what?
Program.
I lied. Can I ask one more question? There were several questions around the U.S. citizen comment. So just to hopefully address that real quickly, you mentioned there are some exceptions where you do not have to be a U.S. citizen. Could you give a little bit of detail on what those exceptions are for our listeners?
Okay. So the executive order that President Ford had issued said basically you must be a U.S. citizen or a national to be appointed to what they call a competitive civil service. With that said, there are some exceptions. If you are in the senior level executive, they're going to bring someone. They're going to bring the commissioner or the IRS. Well, okay, they don't have to. They can or somebody else in the senior level of management. They don't have to meet that criteria. There are some. There's a thing called accepted service. Some federal agencies, like say the Postal Service, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and certain types of positions, like lawyers or chaplains and stuff like that, they don't have. They have exceptions to that. There's a handful of exceptions on USA Jobs under the Resource Center, which goes in a little bit more detail. But certain Native American Indians or certain tribes like that follow exceptions. I know that we don't have exceptions. Well, I shouldn't say that. We did hire one attorney that didn't require U.S. citizenship. But generally speaking, for the entry-level positions, which mostly are competitive, you have to be a U.S. citizen. Yeah, there are some things such as when it comes to Department, like firefighters, and for the Department of Agriculture or the U.S. Forest Services, Department of the Interior. There are some exceptions right there too.
I guess they could look at the job description and the qualifications on anything they're interested in, and it should be listed there. Is that right?
It will list it. It will list in the every job announcement. But if you want to go into specific details, if they go on usajobs.gov, and there's a tab called Resources, and within Resources, look under Who Qualifies, and it has an option of non-citizens what positions that they could qualify for, non-U.S. citizens.
Great. Okay, that's great, Chris. I'm going to wrap it up here. So thank you very much. Everyone still on, thank you as well. And we'll send out the recording to this and within a week. And we'll also have the questions and answers continuation that we'll send out to you as well. So keep an eye open for that. And keep an eye open for our upcoming webinars as we continue on this path of giving you, more information about the government and upcoming webinars, and then information about other opportunities as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Remember what they say. There's strength in numbers. Thanks, folks.